Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well and that you had a great weekend. This is Instructor Toll and I want to talk about the work for week 6. So we are starting on a new project this week. This is our final project for the term. And so you'll want to get started. You'll take a look at reading and watching. And this article is not something that I'm going to test you on this week. It's about weaving personal experience into academic writing, but it's absolutely relevant to what we're doing and you may be tested on it next week. So definitely take a look at this. As usual, the week is broken up into 2 halves. So you'll want to read the history essay assignment sheet. That's the other big piece of reading. You'll want to read this thoroughly and then take the quiz on it. So in some ways, this is similar to the last assignment. We're still dealing with food, but the focus is a little bit different. The way that the research will be incorporated will be different, and the requirement to use personal experience is certainly different. So you want to think about a food or a dish that's particularly important to your family that you could potentially research. So not going out for pizza every week, right? That probably wouldn't work. Something that your family makes or a member of your family makes. And it doesn't have to be something that you eat every day. It could be something that, you eat on special holiday occasions, right? But it should be something that your family makes or a member of your family makes that you could kind of research the history of and kind of talk about your personal experience with. If you get stuck with topics, please reach out as soon as you can. I want to make sure that you find something that's interesting to you. Then you'll want to read the assignment sheet and take the quiz. So there's a short quiz over that material. You'll create a new doc for drafting invention because the drafting invention that you've been working with has been getting pretty long. I've noticed that. So you're going to make a new one for these last 3 weeks. So it's the same process as usual, right? You'll create two new Google Docs. One is going to be drafting invention and response, and the other one will be drafting for the food history project, right? So you can kind of start fresh with those. So Wednesday is pretty light because I know you just turned in that major project, but there is one final assignment for Wednesday. And after you read the assignment sheet, you'll want to do some topic brainstorming. And this is similar to the one that we did before. You'll be proposing 2 topics. Ultimately, you're only going to choose one, right? But you'll want to talk about 2. This is just to give yourself some options and to compare them, but also to show me, okay, you've considered a couple of options and maybe the one that you're leaning towards isn't the one that I think will be the best one for the project or may be hard to research. And so that allows me to give you some additional feedback. So you want to tell me about 2 dishes your family cooks and enjoys, and it doesn't have to be your whole family. Again, a particular style of tamales, or if your aunt cooks chiles en nogada for the holidays, you could talk about that. Maybe there's a certain pie or dessert that your mom always makes for your birthday. That could be something too, but it should be something that's special to your family in some way that you could talk about from a personal perspective and that you could research the history of, right? And again, if something doesn't immediately occur to you, I think brainstorming, just typing stuff out and listing things can be really helpful. Also, just reach out to me right away through email. I can ask you some questions that I think can help. I assume that everybody has something, right? Even if it's not something that immediately occurs to you. So the topic brainstorming is the last thing that's going to be due on Wednesday. On Sunday, there are a couple of assignments due. There's the history essay, initial, secondary sources. So you're going to find and carefully discuss a couple of sources. For one source, you can use Google, right? And kind of to think about, the history of that particular dish that you've chosen. So at this point, you should have a topic. You should choose one of those 2 options that you discussed. And then the second one, you'll use the GCC library databases. And I'd specifically like you to use the databases. So you're going to go to this page. It should link you directly there. I would recommend starting with Academic Search Complete. It's the most general database. It's got access to a lot of other smaller databases. I also really like this one because it gives you the advanced search just up front. So you can search for different fields. You can use the Boolean operator, so and, or not. So these will help you distinguish very clearly between different lists of sources. So let's just take a look at one. History of, let's see. So we get a couple, and these are things that we should look at to see if we can find ebooks. That could be really helpful. Here's another one with more hits. So we have 205 results, which is not a ton. You could probably scroll through these, but you could use the advanced search to narrow this down even more. You would also always want to make sure that you're looking for full text. That makes sure that you have the full text accessible to you. There's going to be a bunch of stuff on here that won't necessarily be full text, and you don't want that stuff. Also, when searching, there's a couple of other tools that you can use. You could use language. So if you speak another language and want to do research in that language and translate it, that's totally fine with me. And for food stuff, that could actually be really useful. Also, with Academic Search Complete, you have the search options here. You can use expanders, apply related words, search within the full text of the articles. So let's look at one example here. So this one has PDF full text. So once we spit this out, we can cite it immediately. So for another good aspect of Academic Search Premier is that you can cite the material. So you can just choose APA 7th edition and you'll have your reference list entry. And for this class, as I mentioned in the syllabus and elsewhere, it's fine if you cut and paste the reference list entries. If you're taking them directly from the database, it's usually pretty accurate, that you want to make sure to double check. You can save it here, you can download things, you can send it to yourself, you can send it to social media if you wanted to, you can add it to a project. So there's a lot of options here. You can also just download the whole PDF. If you find scholarly articles that you like, I would recommend doing that. That could be really helpful as well. If you can't find anything in Academic Search Complete, so sometimes Project Muse or JSTOR might have some things, especially if you're talking about the cultural history of food. Cultural, ethnic, and area studies may have some useful things, especially if you're looking for a dish that originated outside the United States. That could be really helpful. There's also a number of history databases. So US history and world history can be really useful. Those would be helpful as well. Another technique to use, especially if you're getting stuck, is to chain research together. So let's say you find a really interesting piece of information about a food or its history on Google, but you want to research some other aspect of that in the databases. That is something that you can do as well. So the article that you find, especially from the databases, may not directly immediately be about the food, but it should help you talk about the food and its history in some way. If you have questions about how to find research material using these methods, don't hesitate to reach out and let me know. This will be due Sunday. So the last assignment is another generative AI assignment. Again, just to be really clear, you only want to use generative AI in the specific way that's designated here. Using it for other stuff, and including that in your assignment, will mean that you won't get credit for the assignment. So make sure to follow the instructions carefully. But if you're just doing what the assignment says, it's no problem to cut and paste that output into the Google Doc. So just really quickly, so you're going to use that new invention and response Google document as you would have for the previous research assignment. And you're going to create a prompt. You're going to write it yourself. You're not going to have ChatGPT do that for you. You know, that doesn't make a lot of sense, because then you have to write a prompt to get that prompt, right? So you'll write a short prompt, just prompting ChatGPT to give you some information and some secondary sources about your discussion, as well as the APA style reference list entries. That's key here, because you're going to want to do a comparison. So you're going to enter the prompt into ChatGPT or another similar LLM. If you're using something other than ChatGPT, tell me that in your response. And then you'll go ahead and enter the prompt and then include the output that you get, right? Without filters, without going through multiple prompts, just the first prompt that you get, just cut and paste that material. And then you're going to analyze that output. I think that's really important when you're using Gen AI or LLMs, just to analyze what you get, because often if you're using it as a shortcut, you're going to get stuff that may not be accurate. And that actually happened when I inputted this prompt. I got some information that was a little wonky. Some of it was okay, but other information wasn't formatted properly and it wasn't accurately described. So you're going to answer the following questions. What was your impression of the results? How do they compare to using Google or GCC library databases? And then the last question is a critical thinking question. And you can read the article that I posted this week that kind of goes into that. Are there skills or habits or things that you could learn that could be lost when going about this process, rather than kind of trying to find information yourself using Google or the GCC library databases. Those are things to think about. And then, of course, you'll cut and paste all the relevant material, including the stuff from ChatGPT, into the assignment, and also include the link to the Google Doc as well, as usual. Also note, if you're concerned about LLMs or ChatGPT, keep in mind that this assignment allows you to be critical of the LLM. And so if you're critical of these in general, this could give you a chance to kind of talk about that. Also keep in mind that you're not required to input personal information and sign up for ChatGPT. In no way am I asking you to do that. I know people have concerns about that as well. If you still have significant concerns and don't want to do the assignment, you can email me beforehand, before the assignment is due, and we can talk about getting you a different assignment. All right, so that's what we're doing this week. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.